Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sit Heads Meditation Club. My name is John. I organize this group. And Sit Heads is a sitting and social group for people interested in deep meditation practice. No matter what style you practice in, no matter what Sangha you belong to, no matter what teacher you work with, you are welcome here. We love hanging out with anyone who enjoys sitting in silence. So please come hang out with us. You can find us at sit-heads.com. Everything we do is free and donation based. We meet every Thursday evening to sit together and chat about practice. Once in a while, we have a guest join us, as is the case today. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce the inimitable Joan Sutherland Roshi. Thank you so much for being here, Joan. I hope it's okay if I now talk about you in the third person while you look on. Is that okay?
Sure. Oh, my favorite thing.
I'm sure you love it. So here it comes. So Joan is a koan teacher. I had referred to her previously as a Zen teacher, and she very kindly corrected me and told me that it'd be more accurate to refer to her as a koan teacher. My understanding is that Joan first encountered koans in a bookstore near UCLA when she was a teenager. She then went to UCLA studying Chinese and then later Asian languages. She translates from classical Chinese, has practiced in the Tibetan and Soto Zen traditions of Buddhism before focusing on the koan tradition that comes from Rinzai Zen. She studied with the famous, brilliant Joan Sutherland Roshi and co-founded with him, I believe, the Pacific Zen School. She received transmission in 1988, becoming the first woman Roshi in her lineage in the Americas. So that is Joan Sutherland. She has, I've really been struck by the combination of orthodoxy and free thinking that I experienced somehow simultaneously in her teaching, which I think is such a beautiful and brilliant combination. Joan, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to be here with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here too.
Is there anything that you would like to just say before we get started with our talk, you and I? The way this works is you and I will talk for a little bit, and then we will expand it out to Q&A with the whole audience. Is there anything you want to say before we get started?
Yeah, I think just quickly a kind of addendum to the biography, which is I have retired from teaching, so I don't work with students anymore, although I did for a very long time, and it was a great joy. But I founded an organization called the Open Source, which is a network of communities run by teachers I've named who are continuing with the work that we created together. So if there's something about the koan way, this particular approach to koans that appeals to you, and you begin to feel a little bit of doom about it, please look up the open source and the open source teachers, and you can find out a lot about it from them who are still actively working with students. And on the Cloud Dragon website, there's giant archives of my own work if that appeals to you and you want to do a little rummaging through the archives for that.
Thank you, Joan. So actually, I was going to ask you about that. What should someone do who's interested in pursuing this koan path? Because, reading your book, by the way, she is the author of several books, one of which, Through Forests of Every Color, has been blowing my mind page after page after page. It's beautifully written. Just show up just for the prose styling. I really, again, I hope I don't make you blush or anything, but I really do think that you're just an extraordinary writer and prose stylist. So for that reason alone, get this book. And then also the ideas in it are also pretty good. So it's really an extraordinary book. And it's serving as a real introduction for me to the koan path of practice, which I really only dimly understood. I'm sure I still only dimly understand, but it's slightly less dim as a result of reading this book. Uh, and I really appreciate that. As Joan said, it sounds like she has a massive compendium of teachings that you can avail yourself of. And my other question was going to be, what should someone do? Because as I read through Forests of Every Color, while you acknowledge that many people have deep relationships with koans on their own, even outside of a tradition or a teacher relationship, you do talk a lot about what you refer to as the work in the room, right? The dialogue with a teacher. And so I was going to say, it's tricky because in this sort of techno digital dharma era that we're in, it's people want to be able to learn from a video or from a this or from a that, and koan practice sounds like what it really benefits from enormously, and this is true for many streams of dharma, benefits from encounters with a teacher. So what to do if you don't have a teacher? And it sounds like the answer is go to the open source and get yourself one. Do I have that more or less right?
I think that's a great idea. Yes.
Okay.
And just to say that a lot of the open source teachers work online, on the phone, that kind of thing, so that distance or geography, it doesn't determine everything. So you might, if there's no one in your local neighborhood, you might be able to work out another kind of arrangement. And I just, before we move on, I want to say thank you very much for your kind words. I really appreciate that very much. And thanks to everyone for the generosity of your dana. I'm very touched by that.
Yeah, I was very moved to see that. Thank you so much,
Yeah.
everybody, and you're very welcome, Joan. I meant it all, or I wouldn't say it. So that's actually an interesting place for us to start. I want to duck back in a second, and just for anyone who isn't familiar, I suspect that a lot of people on this call and a lot of people who will watch the video in future are at least provisionally familiar with koans and essentially what they are. But I think and without spending too much time on that, I might want to ask, in fact, why don't we do that? Could you, for anyone who doesn't know, or folks from the Sitheads group who practice in some other tradition and came here out of curiosity, but really are starting from ground zero, what would you want them to know about koans? The what of them and the why of them?
Okay. So if you'll indulge me, I'll do a little wandering around for a few minutes.
Please.
There's a pretty well-known koan that even if you don't know a lot about koans, you might have run into, which is, what is the sound of one hand? And the first thing you might notice about that koan is that there's no clapping in that koan. The koan is not, what is the sound of one hand clapping? It's, what is the sound of one hand? And that makes all the difference. What is the sound of one hand clapping is a kind of riddle, or brain teaser. Mm-hmm. And that's a fine thing, but it's not a koan. And what is the sound of one hand? I just felt the whole room drop. That's what it does. It's a profound, deep well of a question. And so if you want to take just a second, especially if you were sitting in the previous half hour, look at your hand and just ask, what is the sound of that hand? So that's what a koan is. A koan is a question in some form like that opens things out very big, very fast. And this particular koan was used by a Japanese teacher named Hakuin in the 18th century. And so when we think about what a koan is, we might think, oh, it's words on a page, it's in a book somewhere and with a list of a bunch of other koans. But let me give you a different idea about the koan. So there's Hakuin read the Blue Cliff Record, which is a Chinese book, so from another country hundreds of years earlier. And there's a line in the Blue Cliff Record that says, "A single hand doesn't cry out in vain," which is a very strange statement, right? A single hand does not cry out in vain. And Hakuin thought, well, if it doesn't cry out in vain, what is the sound of that hand? And so he took that up and used it as a koan. So already a koan is, Hakuin's reading that, the original poem written by Shuedo in China hundreds of years before. We've got an extension into the past. Then Hakuin starts giving it to people. People take it into their meditation, his own students. So it spreads horizontally among his own students. And then it comes down through the centuries and boom, lands here in this room with us. All of that is the koan. Not just the words on a page, not just the original question, what is the sound of one hand, but the experiences of everyone who takes it up, makes a field. And when we take up that koan, we enter that field, which keeps growing and expanding with all of the experiences that people have, the frustrations, the dead ends, the openings, the moments of glorious insight, everything that might happen when we accompany that koan is part of that koan itself. So there we go. And one of the most important things I think about koans is this idea of accompanying. Koans happen in relationship. And of course, the fundamental relationship would be you and the koan, but there are lots of other ones too. And the koans have relationships. So koans often have companions, and the companion koan to what is this? What is the sound of one hand? Is who hears that sound? Mm. Who hears that sound? Mm. So, what is the sound of one hand? Brings you out into something larger. And who hears that sound asks you to consider, who is the who? Mm-hmm. You know, who is the who is hearing that? How do you define that who? Do you think of it as a self? You know, do you think of it as an auditory response in the brain? You know, maybe that's like the most local version of it. Do you think of it as a self? What's your idea about a self? Is a self a problem? Is a self something that you need to work with, manage, refine, corral, improve, destroy? You know, lots of spiritual traditions have lots of different relationships with the self. The koans tend to offer that you think of the self as larger and larger and larger, rather than as something to refine down and make smaller and less important, get bigger and bigger and bigger and include more and more and more, so that a sense of the self as ego becomes just irrelevant. You know, it's not good or bad or, you know, anything else, just irrelevant, because the who hears becomes enormous. Mm. And so that would be an example of two kinds of koans that are companions that work together. Mm-hmm. And I can stop there if you want to ask a question, or I can rattle on. That's up to you.
Feel free to rattle. I mean, I'm just here to make sure that the flow keeps going. But if you're flowing without me, then who wants to hear from me? Please continue.
Okay. So if you have this other sense of a self, you know, this who that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and includes more and more and more, then you get into another kind of koan territory. So here's another. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of koans tonight because they're so beautiful. This is Yunmen, who is a great Chinese koan genius. He asked, "See how vast and wide the world is. Why do you put on your clothes at the sound of the morning bell?" to me, that's the essence of it. See how vast and wide the world is. Experience that when you look at your hand and you see that. Why are we human? Why do we get up and put our clothes on and go about the day? What is the relationship between, what is the self in that relationship? Is it the vast and wide world? Is it the person putting the clothes on? Is it both of them together? So that's a way that the koans address that issue of us in the world, us in relationship. Koans are always about something coming to get you. It's not something you can do on your own. I think about, Noam Chomsky's day job was as a linguist, and he invented this idea that was so beautiful that infants are born hardwired for language. But if they're not spoken to, those parts of their brain will never develop and they won't learn to speak. So it requires someone speaking to them to awaken those parts of their brain so that they learn to speak. That's what koans are. Koans are something that come to us to awaken a part of ourselves that is inherent to us, but that we need something to come into relationship with us to get. And koans are time-tested, reliable ways of doing that, of having that kind of relationship. Yeah. So a big part of koan practice would be making yourself permeable and fetchable.
Yeah, you said that in the book, that the koans come to fetch us, but practice is how we make ourselves fetchable.
Exactly.
I've also heard, I remember, I don't remember who originally said it. Might have been Richard Baker, I'm not sure, but someone said something like, enlightenment is always an accident, but we can make ourselves more accident prone.
Robert Aiken used to say that all the time. Okay. Yeah. So it's the same kind of idea. Although I like the idea of fetchability. I like the idea that the world is coming to get us, because in the world's idea, our awakening doesn't belong just to us, it belongs to the world too. So it has a stake.
And there's a sense, you talk in the book a bit about the differences, just how Buddhism shifted when it came into China and then further evolved into Chan, and some of the pretty notable differences in outlook and orientation and even aesthetic. And when you talk about coming to fetch us, something about that really touches me and sort of softens me, because my practice right now is mainly in Theravada Buddhism, and those early words of the Buddha involved a lot of by your own efforts, work out your own enlightenment, sort of get to work, kind of. And there's almost a feeling of opening and relief that comes at the idea that something might be coming to fetch me. That I don't have to do this all alone. Beyond just, of course, I have my teachers and I have my companions and good Dharma friends, but just the idea of almost the Dharma itself coming for you, or the koan itself coming to fetch you. Yeah. There's something about that lifts my spirit to hear.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's a beautiful thing. Thank you for saying that. And that's why I talk about keeping company with koans, or having koans accompany us, because they become companions in the way that you're talking about. And they're not precious or special. I think you can tell that they're simple in their language. They're easy to remember. You can carry them around with you. You can argue with them, lean on them, enjoy them, love them, have them love you, have them beat you up, and all of that. I mean, it's a very intimate kind of relationship.
Yeah. So when I do have is it okay if I toss a couple of questions at you? And then
Sure.
It doesn't have to feel like a sort of rigid Q&A. We can have it as sort of a conversation, right? As I think we talked about a little bit. But so when you gave those koans to us just before, there was almost like one way that you could respond to that, especially when you started talking about who hears, and you pointed out all the different things that we might think about the self, or the different ways we might view the self, or place ourselves as a self, or place ourselves in relation to a self. So when you hear who hears or who sees, or whatever the case it may be, one response is to start sort of scratching your chin and saying, well, is there a self, or are we in fact just ever-changing process, or how do I relate to it? In other words, to start thinking about it, essentially to start analyzing it. And some of the things you said could be taken as you analyzing, right? Because you did sort of go through the various ways we could relate to self. And to talk with us like that, you have to use concepts, and you have to use things that are susceptible to analysis. My sense is that's not what you are encouraging. That's not the relationship you're pointing towards with koans, is to sit there and then analyze, like, oh, this does point to some interesting thorny questions, some knotty questions about the self. Let's start unknotting those questions with our analytical mind. That's not, I'm getting the sense that that's not the case. And so if that's not the case, and yet you are pointing out that question's profundity is in all these other questions it opens up about how we relate to self, how do we connect with that and explore that depth other than thinking about it?
Yeah, great question. So one thing that's really important to hold about koans is that they are interested in the human mind. They're interested in the natural workings of the human mind. So you're not in an adversarial relationship or a remedial relationship with your own mind. So most people go through the kind of phase that you're talking about, of a cognitive phase where you're trying to figure it out and you're trying to come up with a rational answer. That's fine. It's not where you're going to end up with any luck, but it's fine to do it. And there's a great Chinese concept of exhaustion, that you have to exhaust that. You have to go all the way through it and get to the other side until you feel certain that you've done it. And then if you go all the way through it and you've done it, and there's just not another thought to have about this, sometimes there's an open space that opens up on the other side of all of that. And that's the space where the koan will come to meet you in a different way, in a different kind of relationship. You don't have to go through that process every time. Over time, you begin to realize that you don't have to go through that, but it's fine to do it in the beginning, and almost everybody does. But at a certain point, it drops away by itself, not because you make it or you have this idea like it should go away, but it just naturally drops away, and your allegiance begins to shift to that open field after all the thinking, where something else might happen. And I want to also say here that one of the things that every traditional Zen book will say is that koans are about thwarting the natural mind, or subverting the logical mind, the cognitive mind. That's true, but that's not the goal. That's the first step, and it's the first step that clears the way for the cognitive mind to go do what it does really well, and open the field so that imagination, intuition, emotion, all these other physical sensation, all these other aspects of being can come in, and all of that then comes into your answer, your response to the koan. So cognitive mind, fine. Eventually it's going to fall away because it's not going to be that interesting anymore. You're going to see something that's more interesting. That's not the point. The point is cognitive mind quiets down, your whole self arrives, and your whole self meets the koan, and that's where the encounter really happens.
Yeah, and I have heard it as sort of pat way to describe a koan is, it's an unsolved, you hear it's an unsolvable riddle, right? It's an unanswerable question designed to get your logical mind to give up in frustration. and that's it. And it sounds like what you're saying is that that isn't 100% untrue, but it's very incomplete. And it's just the beginning.
It's just the beginning. Yeah.
And especially, I was interested to learn, and I did learn this initially from reading Shen Yen's work a bit, but he talks about the difference between, and I really hope you'll forgive my pronunciation here. I can speak neither Chinese nor Japanese, but what the sort of broad mainstream world understands as koans would really be more accurately called huatou, right? This sort of nugget, the sort of essence, the one line, the one question. But that actually traditionally koans can be quite long. They're stories they're sort of narratives in a way, and that it was only I can't remember the name of the master who introduced this idea of finding that huatou, that sort of central I don't know, that you had a phrase for it in English, forgive me. Well,
a window on the source.
Thank you. And so it can't just be about silencing the mind, because it's not just about that huatou, right? There's this whole beautiful narrative to, rich with imagery and evocative in its language. And so it can't just be that koans hate language and are trying to use it to shut up your language center, right?
That is one of the funniest stereotypes to me about I won't speak about Zen in general, but about koans. Koans are language. Yeah. I mean, koans are made of words and awakening. That's what they are. And they love language. And the people who used koans, people who've always used koans, are really literate, really well-educated, love poetry, love all, philosophy, love all that kind of stuff. And have this particular relationship with it. So you're talking about Da Hui was the teacher who kind of condensed things down to the huatou. And that's a kind of interesting story that maybe I'll take a minute to just tell, which is his teacher was the final compiler of the Blue Cliff Record, which was the first collection of koans. And his project was definitely, this is literature. This is art. This can go into all aspects of our lives. Let me tell you stories, and let me write poems about those stories. And that was Yuan Wu. And Yuan Wu's idea really was, here are places for your soul to attach. That's what he gave us, was, I don't know why this means so much to me, but it does. And I'm going to find out about it. So he gave us art, and he gave us literature for our souls to attach to the koans. And so hence the stories, the longer stories. And his student Da Hui said, that's all just misdirection. And all that really matters is the awakening. So where's the point in the koan that's like that window to the source, that way through the koan into the vastness? And that's all that matters. And that's what you ought to focus on. So, Another fundamental thing about koans is, when presented with a choice between A and B, the answer is always C. It's never ever, the koans will present you with dualities over and over and over again. And if you think that your task is to figure out which one is right, you've done what we call taking the bait. Really what that koan is trying to show you is, what's the response to this that is neither A nor B, but a C that includes both of them and also predates both of them, right? Is an older thing that includes both of them. So that's what we do with Yuan Wu and Da Hui. We read the stories and love them and use that language and let our souls attach to it. And we also bring into our meditation the huatou, the windows on the source that Da Hui pointed out, and focus in on them. So, and that's where, because I know you all are really interested in kind of, I don't want to say technical aspects, but the actual aspects of meditation. That's where koan practice and concentration practice kind of bump up against each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you bring just a huato into your practice, like who, if you take who hears that sound and all you focus on is who, that becomes a kind of concentration practice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I also see for people who are exploring different schools or who have explored different schools, without I would never say, oh, this is the same as that. And I don't think that's correct anyway. But I definitely see echoes or similarities to things like, if you were just asking who, things like the self-inquiry practice of Ramana Maharshi.
Absolutely, yeah.
There seem to be real similarities there, where the point isn't to come up with a groovy, like, oh, I'm John. That's a thing you exhaust, right, on your way to something truer. But yeah, I definitely see echoes of that. I see echoes of my Dzogchen training from long ago, in these ideas of, you wrote something, I'm going to see if I can find it, that really struck me as being very much like that. It doesn't matter, but I've highlighted so much in this book. I can't just go through all my highlights. We'll be here all day, and I'm gonna wrap up my section soon. It's been my privilege to talk with you, Joan, but soon I'm gonna give everyone else a chance to as well. But I did want to talk about, throw one or two more things at you, if that's okay.
Sure.
And then I'll let it go. I've got a whole bunch of things here that I want to talk about, but we're not going to do that. Maybe I'll cue some things up if some brave soul wants to ask you instead of me. But one question I have is, coming from, a Theravada and a sort of early Buddhist tradition that I'm practicing in right now, so much of the project is about suffering and its end, right? And why do we suffer? In what ways is that suffering unnecessary? And what can we do or not do so that we don't indulge in this unnecessary suffering for ourselves and for others? To what extent does the koan path relate to that project or that perspective? When I read Zen teachings, it depends. But when I read your koan teachings, it's not explicitly talking about things that way, right? Here's why we suffer, and here's how to end the suffering. There's a lot more talk about, I couldn't do it justice, but sort of the vividness of things and the freshness and the aliveness, and embracing reality and embracing life as it is, right? And finding turning towards life rather than away from it. Beautiful things. How does it connect to this question of suffering? Does it?
Yeah. Okay. So, if you go back to the Sanskrit of the First Noble Truth, the word dukkha, which gets translated as suffering.
Yeah, it's a poor translation, true.
Yeah. So if we kind of think about that for a minute, an interesting translation of dukkha is incompleteness. So that has a lot of resonance for me, and to think about the world as incomplete, in process, still making itself, that really changes things, because there's a kind of poignancy to that, that man, it's hard, there's, I think somewhere in the book I say, what a way to make a universe. It's a really hard way to make a universe, and we can feel inside ourselves, this is a really hard way to make a human being. There is difficulty and conflict and frustration and pain and sorrow and all of that. And if we think of that not as something to get away from, something we have to fix, but a symptom of the incompleteness of the world, the question becomes, what do I do with that? How do I work toward healing what is still incomplete? How do I relax into the idea that we're still in process, and engage with that without denying it, without having an opinion about it, just engaging with it. So you and I had spoken a little bit before about Endarkenment, because you were
Yes.
interested in that concept, and we probably don't have time to go into.
No, that was actually going to be one of the things that I was going to say. Hey, if anyone wants to ask Joan about Endarkenment, that's one of the things on my list that I wasn't able to get to.
Okay,
But
so that
sounds
has
like we're going to get to it.
We're going to get to it a little bit. It's a big thing, but so the question of suffering relates to that, because the way koan tradition came from Japan into the West was kind of Kensho centric, and anybody who's done that, that kind of Zen knows what I mean. That there was a real emphasis on enlightenment, on Kensho, which is this kind of enlightenment or satori, and in the broadest terms, enlightenment has to do with what we know. It's a kind of insight. So it's having a true eye, having a clear eye, really understanding things deeply, having insight. It's a very solar kind of thing, constellation of virtues. And okay, quick detour. One of the great joys I had as a teacher was to take this beautiful tradition, to put my own experience up next to it, and to find the places where there wasn't a perfect meeting between the tradition and my own experiences. And then as a teacher, talking to so many people, finding that they had similar disjunctions between what they were actually experiencing in meditation and what the tradition was saying. And so I thought, I wonder if we've dropped something. And I went back into the tradition, and of course I found it there. I didn't find the word Endarkenment, and I don't want to foist that on anybody who doesn't want it. That was my word. But it's an idea that's there, that became kind of in the background of the tradition, which has to do with, there is insight, there is prajna, there is that bright quality and the true Dharma eye and all of that stuff. That's a real thing, and it's a real experience to have the world fall open, and we experience that the vast, perfect oneness of everything. That is that. And at the same time, there's also a profound mystery. There's also what falls maybe under the category of what we don't know and what we can't know. At the center of the crystal palace of enlightenment, there is a deep, dark well we can't see to the bottom of. And to come to rest in that not knowing, in that uncertainty, in that mystery, is what Endarkenment is about. And so we come to experience both the radiance of insight and the radiance of mystery, and to bring them together. And suffering, the question of suffering, which is a real and deep and true question, becomes part of that process of Endarkenment. How do we hold that mystery? Because it's a mystery. Why should it be? Is a mystery. And I came to see that those two things were equally important, that they complemented each other and that they healed each other, which is really, really important. Enlightenment without Endarkenment can be pretty chilly. And Endarkenment without enlightenment can get kind of moist, kind of wet. So together they heal each other and complete each other. And together they make an arc that each of us is on, which is awakening. So awakening has moments of enlightenment, moments of Endarkenment, has the process of bringing those things together. And awakening is simply our lives. It's the path we're walking from the moment we're born till the moment we die, and probably before and after that. And it's glorious sometimes and really hard sometimes. And we have times when we leap ahead and times when we stumble, and times when we have enlightening moments and endarkening moments. But that, for each of us, awakening is our own, and it will take the shape of our lives. It will take the shape of an individual human life. And that's how I see that.
Thank you for that. That's beautiful. And I'll just be very candid that I don't fully understand.
Me
and
neither.
that's okay. I'm neither fully enlightened nor fully endarkened, but you know.
Well, you're a young man, so you have lots of time.
Decreasingly so day by day, Joan. But okay, this raised so many more questions for me, but I'm sure that it raised an equal number of questions in the minds of our other listeners. And rather than mine monopolizing the opportunity to ask you those questions, why don't we open it up so that other folks can ask you what's on their mind? Does that sound all right?
Great.
Okay. Eduardo, would you like to ask your question?
Okay. Hi, Joan. My name is Eduardo Fuentes. I'm calling you from Santiago, Chile.
Welcome.
What is your favorite introductory koan? When you first start working with people, you see that they have an interest. What is the koan you would start with in general? I know some people prefer mu or no, but there are other options.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Eduardo, I would decide that with the person, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. There are, as you well know, I'm sure, a handful of koans, of which what is the sound of one hand is one and no is another one, that seem to work pretty well in terms of bringing someone to that first opening, which begins, a long series of koan practice. But people are different. And so it wouldn't be the same answer for everybody. And I have a handful of them. Those would be two of them. For those of you who aren't familiar with no, it's the koan where someone asks Jiaozhou, does a dog have Buddha nature? And Jiaozhou replies, no. And so then to get back to that question about the wato of that koan is that no, that's what you bring into your meditation. You might have heard it as mu, which is the Japanese word, but for a Japanese person, mu has a meaning, and that's why we use no, because we're English speakers, those of us who are, and it has a meaning. Another one might be a woman comes and asks a question of her teacher, what is Zen? And the teacher responds, the heart of the one who asks is Zen. So that's another one. And I just want to emphasize that it's different for different people. And sometimes someone will come in with a koan that's grabbed them, and that becomes their first koan because it came and got them, it came and fetched them. And so then we'll work with that. And that could be any of the koans.
But would you show them, talk to them about the different koans, and they would select one, or they would work a little bit with each one and then go in depth for one of the options? How do you actually operate there?
I would make a choice myself based on my interaction with them and my impression of them, and so we would start there. Usually that works pretty well. Every once in a while, I can see that it's not, the affinity isn't right. It's not the right koan for them. And then I'll talk to them about changing, and we'll change it to something else. But that doesn't happen all that often, but I'm totally open to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. And thank you, Joan. Someone wanted me to ask a question for them. So here's that question. Will you please ask for me? What gets you up in the morning, day after day? What is your deepest faith?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. The last talk I gave was about what is the most beloved, which I think is another way of asking your question about deepest faith. And I would have to say that it is this enormous tenderness that has grown in me through the years of keeping company with koans for the world. I'm gonna cry. The poignancy and tenderness of this world in all its beauty and in its suffering, especially right now, with the climate catastrophe and with, the kinds of social injustice that we've seen and all of it. My heart swells all the time and fills with that, and that is my that's my lodestar. That's what gets me up, gets me to put my clothes on at the sound of the bell, and fills me all day long.
Thank you, Joan, and thank you to the person who asked that question.
Yeah.
Another question sent to me to ask on behalf of the questioner. Well, I think I might know your answer, but let's see. I shouldn't presume. I live far from any qualified koan teacher, but a koan from your book, whose name I have trouble pronouncing. There's a slash and then the word Gates at the end.
Oh, Asakias and Gates. Yeah.
Asakias, thank you. Asakias Gates. So this person
Eduardo
says,
knows what that means.
sorry?
Eduardo knows what that means.
Oh, yeah?
It's a ditch. It's a ditch, a water ditch for irrigation.
Okay. So what language is that?
Spanish.
It's Spanish? I live far from any qualified koan teacher, but a koan from Asakias Gates has got me by the throat. I've seen a lot of emphasis on the importance of working with a teacher. Can I get anywhere with this koan on my own?
Yes. I wish I knew what koan it was. Yes, you can certainly get somewhere on your own.
If they want to send me in the chat what koan it was, I'll relay it to you.
Okay. Yeah. How wonderful that something came to fetch you. And I really wish you well with that. And
would you like to know what it is? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Nothing will do. What do you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So ask that question. Take it with you throughout the day. Keep asking it in situation after situation after situation. Keep asking it. And one of the things that I think is really important, especially with a koan like that, is it's not about finding an answer, like, oh, this is what I have to do. It's more about keeping a sense of inquiry open all the time. So you're not looking for a resolution. You're looking to maintain a state of openness to not knowing, to mystery. And that's a great koan for doing that. So I think my suggestion would be that where you will find the juice is in the way that it keeps you open to unknowing and allows you to get really comfortable with that and keeps you engaged in the world. What is this? What is this? What is this? And that's where the transformation will come. And you can do that for quite a good while. And I wish you a lot of luck and joy with it, as well as the inevitable frustration, which is not a problem, but a feature.
Yeah. Thank you, Joan. And thank you, questioner. So, all right. Let's see. Leon, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about, but I'm going to keep it to one question, and it really has to do with how one relates to a koan teacher. And I'll give you the quick background to that question. I started koan practice with Maizumi Roshi at ZCLA. I'm sure you're familiar. Back in the day, more than 30 years ago. And at ZCLA, when I got my training, such as it was sit down, count your breath for a few years, and we'll get right back to you.
Okay.
And no real explanation of that. I went to Thursday evening lectures and listened to Maizumi Roshi until I understood him, which took 6 months. And then after some considerable amount of time, I said, okay, I guess we start koan practice because I really don't know what's going on here. My relationship with Maezumi Roshi was, he was this mythic creature to me, this creature who completely overawed me. And in those days, I don't know if it's still that way today. I still, when I talk with my current teacher, you knock on the door, you go in, you do your prostrations, and do your 3 full prostrations, you sit down, you recite your koan, and then you get into the interview. This was overwhelming and difficult, and performance anxiety and all of the other things that came with it. It was enormously difficult. It was many, many, many years until I realized the great compassion sitting opposite me.
Leon, with all the respect in the world, I want to encourage you to just find your way toward your question, if that's okay.
Right, almost there.
Okay.
So that's from my point of view. From the teacher's point of view, how can you grease the skids a little bit? Because it's still difficult.
So I want to acknowledge and offer my respect to your perseverance, because it sounds like you were persevering through difficulty, and that's a great thing to do. That is a way of teaching koans, a time-honored, traditional Japanese way of teaching koans. It's the way I learned in the beginning, although it changed over time. We have developed a different way of doing that, which allows for more relationship, more information passing, more explanation, more all of that, but I think doesn't lose the luminous quality of the encounter. It's still Vimalakirti's 10 by 10 foot room that has portals to all the other worlds in the universe that we're sitting in together. We're still sitting in that field. I just think that it's possible to have a bit more communication back and forth. And good for you for staying with the frustration. The frustration can be part of it. The performance anxiety can be part of it. And with time, the hope would be that the performance anxiety drops away on its own, because it's just not that interesting anymore compared to what else might happen. And if I'm doing my job sitting on the other cushion, I'm providing a field in which you can discover for yourself that there's a whole lot more interesting stuff that could happen. And then we do that together.
Yeah, it is that way now, but I wish it had been that way a lot sooner. And one caveat.
Don't throw your past away.
No, never.
It's part of your awakening.
Well, one caveat I would like to mention: when Maezumi died, that struck me and hurt me more than I believed possible. I had no idea how that relationship had built. It was beyond my understanding and took me completely by surprise and rebuilt my life for me in a strange way. So,
well, hold to how that's part of you now. Maezumi, where did Maezumi go?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Still teaching. Of course he's still teaching.
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Leon. Frank, would you like to ask a question?
I would love to.
Is that Frank? Frank? Hello.
Yeah. Sorry. We've been practicing together for 20 years, and sorry, you have never stopped being my teacher. And your other teachers. Sorry, I'm going to cry. So my short question: how would you like to see practice communities carry on this koan tradition in the future?
So you thought you'd start with something small, huh?
This is my third attempt. I keep on going back and forth with John. And by the way, your Audible book rocks.
Thank you.
And Sandy says hi.
Hi, Sandy. Please give her my best. That's it. How do you want them to go forward? It's on you now. I retired. It's on you. So what are you going to do?
I actually wrote this down. because I knew you would do this. My first response is to just show up. And the second is to be welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the two. That's what comes up for me.
Those are good starts. Yeah. Does it work?
When I show up and I'm welcoming, yes.
Okay.
Actually, I need to be more welcoming to myself than others sometimes. But it's interesting to see the changes in our sanghas over time. So we just had a great sangha, multi-sangha retreat last month, and it was pretty wonderful for all of your open source sanghas to get together. So I think we're on a good trajectory there, but times are changing, technology is changing, maybe some generational differences of how to be welcoming to different people that I think I'm still learning about.
That's so great. So keep learning about it. And I have a really strong sense that something's gathering and growing within the open source, and I'm really excited to see where it goes, because there's some energy, bubbling now that I think is going to be good for everybody, I hope. So
All right,
thanks
well,
for being a part of it. Thanks for being such a steadfast and important part of it for so long.
I couldn't do anything else. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Buddy, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, buddy.
Helping and being helped, not to. Can you say something about that, please?
Buddy is referring to a koan, one of my favorites, where Pong Ling Jiao, who is a young woman, is out with her father, and they make their living by making baskets and selling them, and they're out making baskets and selling them, and he trips and falls, and as he's falling, she throws herself down next to him, and he says, "What are you doing?" And she says, "I saw you fall, so I'm helping." And then he says, "Luckily no one was looking." I love that koan. I love okay, if someone's falling, I'm going to fall right down next to them, and that's how I'm going to help. The beauty and the simplicity of that. And then the not to that you point to of Layman Pong saying, "Luckily no one was looking." There is no observer. There's no one outside this moment. It's the two of us lying on the grass together, having just fallen down together, and that is the whole world. Is that your question? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, buddy. Thank you, Joan. Ernest, would you like to ask your question? I think he's saying that he'd like me to ask the question. Okay, I'm happy to. Do you consider "I don't know" a koan?
That's a really good question. Is it a koan for you? I think would be the first question. I've had koans that came out of my own life that aren't in the curriculum, but boy, were they powerful koans. And so I think the question is it a koan for you? And if it is, then yes, it's a koan. But the thing that can be tricky about "I don't know" is that I, unless the inquiry is, what is that I? So I wonder about playing with it and for it to become who doesn't know. Might be kind of interesting. But the other thing I'll say about it is that you have really good antecedents, because in China, Chan people, when they would greet each other, instead of saying hello, would say, I am not certain, which is such a great way to start a conversation, right? I am not certain. And they would say that to each other and then go from there. And so if that's the sense that you're asking, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good thing to carry. Again, carry it around through the day, bring it out. Keep saying it in every situation. As every situation comes up, I don't know. I don't know. And my guess is that that's going to open up into something very beautiful and joyous. I don't know. Fortunately, I don't know. So if you find that that's what's happening, that you're heading towards, fortunately, I don't know, and then looking at the space that opens up when you do that, then yeah, that's a koan.
Lorna, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Hi, Joan.
Hi.
It's Lonnie, and there's a bunch of us here.
Hi, Lonnie.
Hi. We're all here. Steffi, Ellie, Piper, and we're all here together.
Hi. I was wondering where the ladies were. There you all are. Thank you.
The tea ladies.
I just had a question, which, a few of these conversations have circled around it for me, and really the whole idea of not knowing is most intimate and how that relates to Endarkenment. I feel like, we used to talk about koans as being a conversation in which there was this aha moment, and that always felt sort of like a kensho moment to me. But whereas Endarkenment feels like, and maybe you should, for me, I'm wondering, is Endarkenment almost the opposite of that? Is an I don't know, and a willingness to, I think once you used to talk about it as lying on the, I have this vision of lying on top of the ocean and the dark, deep ocean underneath,
Mm-hmm.
and getting a comfort level with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yes.
that, yeah.
Yeah. Really, really experiencing the fundamental mystery of everything, and really being able to lie down on the ocean and know that it's dark all the way to the bottom, is another kind of aha moment. Although it might not happen with the bright particularity of an enlightenment experience, you can think of enlightenment experiences, those kinds of openings, as being kind of qualities of the mind. They have the quality of electricity zapping around among the neurons in the brain. It's fast and instant. Whereas Endarkenment moments are more like the beating of a heart, and it's a slower rhythm and a more organic rhythm, and it can take some time. Usually Endarkening is a slower process, but no less deep, and comes to a place that is no less profound. It's just that it tends to follow a different rhythm, the rhythm of the world into which you are Endarkening. Is that answering your question?
It does, and thank you so much, Joan. I'm sorry we're all in the dark here and you can't see our faces. We're outside, but thank you so much. It's perfect.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing in not knowing is most intimate, because of course for us that was one of our touchstone koans. So someone asks someone else, what are you doing? And the someone else responds, I'm on pilgrimage. So what is pilgrimage like? I don't know. And the teacher responds, not knowing is most intimate. And so that's Endarkenment, is to know that to be as close to the mystery as possible is the most intimate way to be in the world, when not even our thoughts, opinions, judgments, quick takes, and Twitter feeds are between us and the world at all. It's lovely to see you all in the Santa Fe night.
Thank you all. Thank you, Joan. Really
Thank you,
appreciated
Joan.
that. So someone also asked me, Please ask Joan to elaborate on Endarkenment, but I feel like that kind of just happened, right?
Mm.
Unless there's more that you want to say. Otherwise, I'll go to the next question.
This is not a pitch, but I do spend some time in the book laying that out. And so if that's something you're interested in, Through Forests of Every Color is a good place to get a longer exposition about it.
Definitely get, this is a pitch. Buy Through Forests of Every Color. It's really it's really an astonishing book. And I wouldn't be so hyperbolic. I don't have to be hyperbolic like this. I just really have been struck by this book. It's beautiful. You should get it. Let's see. Someone asked me to ask you. I think she is working with John Tarrant on a new translation of the Blue Cliff Record. How's that going?
Okay, so yes, and it's done, and it's been done for quite a while, and it's one of the great things in my life to have been so immersed in that book for so long and to retranslate it from the ground up, from the original Chinese up. If you're interested, go to the Cloud Dragon website, joansutherlanddharmaworks.org, I think it is. And you will find it. There's a PDF of the translation of the koans with a bunch of notes.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Let's see. Someone asked, again, could you ask for me? Many years ago, I heard you ask, do you trust your life? Mm-hmm. Can you talk about how one can come to trust their life, especially given how challenging our lives can be?
Yeah. So what does it mean to trust your life? That seems like the first question. And if trusting your life means for things to turn out the way you want them to turn out or hope they will, probably you will be disappointed. But if trusting your life means settling into the tenderness and the poignancy of life, can you rest there? Even when it's hard, even when things happen that you don't want to be happening, even things that are by all measure, really wrong. Can you trust the fundamental fact of being alive and keep yourself open to that, keep working with that, keep yourself open to the possibility of seeing things in a different way or changing? I asked that question because I found that so many people were in kind of a fight with life for being life, and so it was a way of trying to withdraw from a conflict with life into an engagement with life, which in no way denies the difficulties and terrors of it, but offers a way to engage with that, and rather than be in conflict with it, where you're bouncing off life all the time.
Thank you. Very well said. Do you think we have time for one more if we make it quick, or should we wrap it up here?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh, I'll never say no to another question.
Okay. All right. Last one. And for anyone whose questions we didn't get to, I'm so sorry. We just have the time that we have. So we're not able to get to everyone. There were a few more questions. I mean, Joan, if you like, I think we should wrap up for your sake. So we'll wrap up with this one. So Vladimir, would you like to ask your question?
My question is, can you say anything about helping small children, or we're all children in some sense, but young adults and children on the way to their unfolding, or helping them along the path with koans or otherwise?
Yeah, it's so specific to each child. What is the awakening as near as you can discern it in the unfolding in that child? and how might you support it? I have never found that sort of enforcing meditation times or anything like that works. You know, it just doesn't. But sometimes if you do it in a different way, if you do it in a way of accompanying, if you think about, I am accompanying this child's awakening, and how can I be a good companion to that awakening? Which means, you know, kind of paying attention and listening and noticing and trying things that you think might encourage it and support it. And when you're wrong, stopping, you know, and trying something else. Sometimes if you do that for a while in a kind of quiet and friendly way, you'll wake up one day and discover that that child has come to sit down next to you in meditation because it has been presented as something, you know, that might be worth loving, rather than a duty to perform. So think about the accompanying, thinking about being a companion to that child's awakening. Think about what is the particular shape it's taking with them, and what might best encourage that. And when you make mistakes, pull back, notice the mistake and pull back from it and try something else. Is that responsive to your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vladimir. Thank you, Joan. So with that, again, apologies to anyone whose questions we didn't reach. Joan, thank you so much. This was really beautiful. Joan, are there any last things that you would like to say before we wrap up for the evening?
Just a big thanks. Thanks to you, John, for inviting me and for the quality of the conversation, which I enjoyed very much. And thanks to all of you who came to participate and for your good questions and your good attention. I'm really grateful. And as a retired person, it was pretty fun to be back in a sort of virtual work in the room a little bit with folks. Thank you for that opportunity. And
thank you for being willing to step back out of retirement briefly for this.
And if you're doing the 3-hour sit and you want a koan, try What is the Sound of One Hand? You can do that while you're sitting.
There you go. Perfect. So with that, I want to thank you all one last time. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your practice. Thank you, Joan. Everyone, good night. Deep bows to all of you. Take care.
Good night.